Being an abolitionist requires unlearning every single thing we've been told about jails, prisons, and police since birth. To consider people as full human beings instead of monsters and psychos. To prioritize community over our selfish need for revenge. This is awkward. 10 demands. We'll tend to mental ailments, apply an intervention, ending the surveillance, denying all detention, rebuilding our communities, village by village. It's time to check your white male heterosexual privilege.
Hey everybody, welcome back, FreeMe podcast. I got me a special guest today, goes by Awkward. I don't know too much about this guy, so I'm going to give you a quick rundown on how him and I hooked up. So I'm friends, as you guys know, with Temujin Kensu on Twitter, and Awkward ended up following me on Twitter, and I seen a couple of his posts, and I just reached out to him one day and just asked if we could hook up and have us a discussion on, you know, just today's climate, everything that's going on. So without further ado, I'm going to let Awkward introduce himself and his MO of life.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been trying to help our mutual friend get freed for a while now. It's long overdue. I know for your listeners, you had him on already, so they know this is an innocent man who's been in prison for over 3 decades. And, they're letting out a lot of people who deserve to be let out as well. But as he says, they're letting out people who have committed crimes. Listen, we've all committed crimes in our lives, those who are deemed criminal versus the vast population of those who've committed one crime or another, there's a stark difference between the two. So I'm not saying Temujin is, never jaywalked or anything, but he certainly didn't kill someone. He was hundreds of miles away. And there's a reason they're not letting him out, and it's political. He's very, and I told him this when I talked to him on the phone months after interviewing him, for the first time, that, he's very selfless. He is continually fighting for the rights of other incarcerated people and isn't afraid to stand up to the power holders and go as far as to sue for rights. And I believe that's, that in addition to the people who framed him in the first place are the reasons he remains where he does. Fighting for Temujin is par for the course for me, I guess you could say. I've been fighting for racial, social, and criminal justice for decades now. I'm also a political hip hop artist. I co-founded 10 Demands. It's an organization that created the 10 Demands for Justice, which lays the groundwork, starting with defunding the police and a lot of other measures we can take today that, builds the foundation we need to fully abolish police and prisons. So I'm probably most well known for my abolitionist work, my anti-fascist work, and my music. My most recent song has the same name as the organization, 10 Demands, and it puts to music all the stuff we're seeing today in over-policing and mass incarceration, and ends with solutions that, many can be implemented today. Some are further along down the road for a more humane, peaceful, safe, healthy society, starting with those communities most impacted by criminalization and poverty. And I think it's worth noting that Twitter and YouTube have done their very best to censor this video. There are multiple warnings before you can even watch the video. And it's not, the video itself is footage from the streets and from prisons and jails. And the things I'm saying are facts. So I think it's worth noting that they're trying to silence me.
Well, they're trying to silence a lot of people, and that's. I watched the video. It's a powerful video. I mean, it moved me, you know. But as you said, it's facts, and what you're showing in the video is nothing any different than we've seen on the news, right?
Right.
And what you say is absolutely truth, and the censorship that's going on is ridiculous, and it scares me, you know. So you
Yeah.
have been labeled as Antifa.
Right.
How does that strike you?
Well, to me, if you're not Antifa, you're Profa. If you're against fascism, you're aligned with Antifa. The term carries a lot of weight in more moderate and circles, and obviously all the way to the far right. Antifa has been labeled a terrorist organization, but Antifa isn't even an organization at all. It's entirely decentralized, and there are groups of anti-fascists that have formed all over the country and the world using the label Antifa. That's been around forever. But the person who labeled me Antifa militant is Andy No, a known propagandist, liar, and fraud who sold kill lists to Atomwaffen. So this person's goal in labeling me that was to target me, and and as well as the person that I interviewed that sparked his interest in me in the first place.
I was going to ask what sparked that interest in you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I have a somewhat, I'm a public figure. There's a lot of people just like me, though, and not all of them have caught his attention. Andy has an obsession with Portland. Portland has tons of Proud Boys, and Andy protects Proud Boys, and just wrote a whole book full of bullshit about Antifa. That his book has been ripped to shreds. And so I interviewed the DA of Portland, who's got a really difficult job, with 9 months straight of protests, with a history of tensions between fascists and anti-fascists. And he gets heat from both the left for not doing enough, and for the right for being, among other things, friends with an Antifa militant, which is what Andy wrote in his article and tweeted about. The DA of Portland, Mike Schmidt, ran on a progressive platform, and is doing, as far as I can tell, his best in really difficult circumstances to try to change the system from within. When I interviewed him, I was pretty clear, like, I've been trying to radicalize him for since 1999, and he's never going to be who I am. He's I don't think he would consider himself an abolitionist. Again, he works within the system. But just by allowing himself to be interviewed by me, he was lumped in with so-called Antifa, and he and I both received death threats following that interview. Mike finally said publicly what I've known for a long time, that for pretty much, if maybe ever since the interview, maybe even beforehand, but for months and months and months, he and his family have not been safe enough to sleep in their own home.
Yeah, there's a lot of craziness going on, man. There's a lot
Right.
of
And the Proud
craziness.
Boys are protected by the police, along with Patriot Prayer. And, policing itself is a white supremacist institution. Its invention was post-slavery, in order to round up new slaves. And on top of that, police departments over the last, 2-3 decades have been actively infiltrated by white supremacists. So in addition to the institution and the way they are empowered and trained to patrol criminalized communities, there are actual Klansmen and actual Proud Boys on these police forces. And that was really clear when we saw how many cops from communities all over the country who came on January 6th to the so-called Capitol building insurrection. They didn't just, the Capitol Police handheld these right-wing people into the Capitol building, but a lot of the people there from other cities were police themselves.
Right. That's what they're finding out.
Yep.
So what is the core issue going on in Portland? I mean, what is...
Well, I mean, I think that, Mike won with what they call like a mandate. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was the largest percentage victory in the history of the country for a district attorney. So that suggests that the community is pretty leftist. I'm not sure what inspired the growth of Proud Boys in that particular city, but they feel empowered there and put on marches regularly, and they come and they're joined by other fascist Nazi groups, and they just walk around threatening people with guns and knives, beating people up. And the police are incredibly corrupt in Portland and incredibly violent, and they are protected. I mean, I just spoke to someone the other day who has, who's facing up to 30 years in prison for essentially like defending another leftist from potentially being killed by one of these fascists who just showed up in a bus one day. It's something I plan to talk to Mike about soon. That case is one of many where, and as we saw an independent news that, night after night, the city and state police, as well as federal agents, have beaten, tear gassed, and kidnapped and arrested leftist and Black Lives Matter protesters. And when extremist alt-right groups show up, they are not faced with the same police response. They are basically allowed to do whatever they want, including beating up journalists, which has been captured on video. So it says a lot about the city itself, that the community and the police are completely at odds. And it says a lot about our country, because I believe that the vast majority of people in this country are at odds with police as well.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. If you could name the climate of our country in one word, what would that word be?
Oh man, I don't know if I could use it one word. I mean, I think I think the quickest way I could sum it up would be, I think the criminalization of race and poverty, coupled with the collusion of corporations and politicians. It's the 1% versus the 99%. And if you're Black, brown, indigenous, trans, what you're going to experience is just heightened. The statistics are incredible. I mean, cops kill 3 people a day, and Black people are 600% more likely to be the victims. Indigenous people, the statistics are even worse. So if you happen to be poor and not white, it's not safe to leave the house. I mean, the guy who filmed the murder of Eric Garner, Ramsey Orta, said, he didn't tell me directly, he said that, for months prior to capturing the murder of his friend on video, he every time he left the house would have his camera or his phone in his hand ready to record. They were stopped and frisked so frequently. And Black friends of mine, including those who helped create the 10 demands, they talk about having these conversations with their children. Like, there's this fallacy perpetuated by propaganda that police are there to serve and protect, and they do neither, unless they're protecting property or serving the needs of the rich. And it's a dangerous place when a third of all stranger murders in this country are committed by the people we're supposed to call for help.
Well, you're absolutely spot on, and the word I guess I would use, right, that comes to mind is divisiveness, right? The country is very, very divisive in all factions, right?
Yeah.
And what you're saying is spot on. It's almost getting to the point to where it's almost like extortion. It's almost like if you want police protection in your community, like you're going to have to pay in some sort, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um,
Yeah. And there's the, like, the things that people like me who spend a lot of time trying to educate people about the truth on this stuff, we're constantly asked, like, what about, who are you going to call if you're being robbed or whatever? Or, what do you do if you're raped? Well, cops don't stop crime. They show up after if you're lucky. And cops solve 2% of all major crimes. There are hundreds and thousands of rape kits just sitting in evidence, never going to be tested. So that's the first part, is acknowledging that what we have now was created by people, and it's doing exactly what it was intended, which doesn't serve most of us. So if we have now, if we can agree it's not working, it's not even that brave to try to unlearn everything you've been taught since birth and be creative to come up with alternative solutions that are actually going to make us safer and healthier.
well, and that's what I'm seeing going on, right? Is whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's Antifa, whether it's Proud Boys, or any other, grouping, right? Is the force of their opinion and will on the next person, right? And I just don't understand where all of this is coming from. It's like the group of white kids, I believe it was in Baltimore, that was standing in front of the lady while she was trying to eat, if you remember, um, trying to force her to raise her fist in solidarity. And I mean, they're around her and they're yelling at her, and this lady's just sitting here at this diner trying to have dinner, and she's telling them, "No, I'm eating dinner." Right?
Oh, are you talking about the protesters who were um like harassing ostensibly rich people who were out at dinner? Or are you talking about a specific case with one
This
woman?
no, this was a specific case where it was a group of people, white kids. They were white kids in
Yeah,
front of this white lady, and they were trying to force her to raise her fist in solidarity as she
right.
was eating.
Yeah,
And they were calling her racist, and they were calling her all of these things. And
yeah.
little did they know that this lady just came from speaking at a Black Lives Matter rally. She
Huh,
just left the rally, went to go eat. But
interesting.
the things that are going on in the universities, the things that are going on over in Portland, just everybody telling people what to think and what to say. And it's like nobody is listening to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. But I do think there's an important distinction between radicals on the left and reactionaries on the right. Anti-fascists, anti-racists want equal justice. They want everyone to be able to go to the doctor. They want everyone to have a home, or roof over their head. They want everyone to be able to feed their families. The people on the right want me dead because I'm Jewish. They want, they chant blood and soil because they believe that only they and their skin color and their sexuality and their religion have a right to this land that was stolen from indigenous people. So while I hear what you're saying in regard to the methods people take to push their viewpoints, can potentially be similar and not always the most effective, the reason people are doing these things is very different. But I do think it's an important point, though, that you make, that how you present your cause and your strategies to your activism are very important. I believe that looting, for instance, is a natural response to oppression. I believe protest, including violent protest, is a natural response to the violence that the people protesting face on a daily basis. But I also think that the people spray painting Black Lives Matter or breaking a window or lighting a Target on fire should not be the same people that are, sitting down at meetings with city councils to defund the police. I think all of these different pathways are critically important, and we're far less successful in our demands if there's not a threat of violence and a threat of overthrow. But I do think it's important to be strategic and to separate responsibilities, so to speak.
And I agree with what you're saying, right? However, what I guess I'm having conflict with is how you said, people are on the left are, this way, people on the right are this way. And the only reason why I have a problem with that is because I'm a conservative minded person for the most part, you know, but I don't
I said far right. I don't want to cut you off and continue, but just so we're clear, I said far right. So I don't mean someone who considers themselves conservative when I say that.
Well, and either way, and you did, and I guess you're going to have radicalism on anywhere you go, on either side, and either side I feel is going to feel justified in their radicalism. What I don't like is I feel like words like white supremacy, racism, things like this are getting thrown out there recklessly, right? Not to say that it's not out there, but I feel like these are getting thrown out there recklessly, and it's creating a group hostility, which is also creating violence in cases where it may not have been such, because America has really become a land of freaking idiots, right? Idiots and parrots, and half these people don't even really truly understand what white supremacy is.
Yeah.
They don't even understand. All they know about Hitler, right, is that he killed 6 million Jews. They don't understand who Hitler was. They don't understand how he came into power, how somebody like that can come into power. They don't understand any of that, because if they did, they would see that the same thing is happening here. We're putting ourselves in the same position.
Yeah. And you make some really good points. I think that this is why class solidarity is so important. And why, as an abolitionist, I don't believe that anyone is without potential for transformation. So, just because someone was in Charlottesville on the wrong side doesn't mean that I can't, like so many former Nazis who do this every day, can't talk to this person and change and teach them the truth, and how they have more in common with a poor Black person or someone like me than they do with the people they don't realize they're supporting, the rich CEOs and their protectors, the police. And and Nazis have been converted, so to speak. It's not like homosexuality where you're trying to change how someone is born. When you convert a Nazi, you're helping them unlearn things that they've been taught since they were born. People are being, misled with disinformation, and it's generations of this.
That's
It's
absolutely correct.
you
You
know
are spot on, and that's my message. Awkward. It's not hating this person because they have an idea, an ideal that I don't subscribe to, but it's getting this person to understand that you've been brainwashed,
yeah,
right? I grew up under Confederate flag. My parents are older. They were raised in farmland, Ohio, you know, and yes, they had that white pride stigma to them. It's not that they were overtly racist, but it's the undertone, right? The first time I brought a black girl home, it was they didn't even respond to it, and they treated her with love and kindness, but again, it was a facade, right?
right,
Because in the pit of their stomach, they felt like, well, why couldn't you bring a white girl home,
right.
right? And that's the racism that we're facing in America today, right?
Yes, and and as true as that is, and as endemic as it is, I don't consider that to be um, the greatest hurdle. I think when it comes to who we elect as our leaders, clearly with the election of Donald Trump and his overt racism, um, you know, and fascistic tendencies. I mean, I think it is clear that the brainwashing and the racism, the casual racism of half this country can result in pretty dangerous effects. But I think that systemic racism is which is what separates racism from race-based bigotry, because a black person can be bigoted against white people. I would go as far as to say they have every right to be, whereas a white person doesn't. However, what racism really entails is power, and systemic racism, the differentiation in how black people and brown people are policed, the differentiation in how in educational quality, the difference in how they are treated by doctors in hospitals, their access to the level of these services. Same with real estate. These are all the systemic ways, and there are many others that on a much greater scale than interpersonal prejudices impact entire communities. Not only are black people, for instance, um, facing the pandemic in the worst possible way, disproportionately getting sick and dying from COVID because of all the underlying, systemic things that put them in harm's way. They are also in New York City, for instance, receiving the vaccine at the lowest rate. So this is just a present day example of the ways in which racism that is ingrained in our institutions, can really impact entire groups of people for generations upon generations.
Well, there's no question on that. And I just don't know if I want to be careful, because I know that there's racism everywhere, right? And I'm a subscriber to believe that if you're an American, if you were born and raised in America, you have racist traits with you because it's talked about every day. It's in your face every day, right? So it's it says I'm running out of time here. Hold on one second, let me, because I got this. Okay. Yeah, because it had me in there twice for some reason. So if you have 3 or more in the Zoom, it kicks you out after 40 minutes. I wanted to get out of that, but I think our issue is more of a class issue, right, than it is a race issue. And I think because of the way that America was designed 400 years ago, right, it definitely put black people, the racism that they received back then, it definitely put them 400 years behind us, right? So there's going to be a large class divide in between those races right there. And until we find a way to speed up their education, the foundation where they can accelerate their education to match us, to catch up to us, it's always going to appear that there's racism, right?
Well,
And and I just want to say, and I'm not subscribing to this. This is something that I'm pondering on, right? And what this does is it leaves open an agenda for either party to come in and take advantage of that and use that as racism to create division amongst us American citizens, right?
yeah. But I think, it's important to note that, like, the discrimination didn't end when slavery ended.
No, of
Um,
course not.
and I think I knew you knew that. But you said that something needs to be done to, like, change educational inequity, for instance. And to me, on the one hand, there are a lot of resources at the federal level. Most of the money is spent on war. And there is, in most states and in most cities, more than enough money. But let's just say that a state or a municipality is suffering. There's a really clear, obvious solution that people are afraid or refuse to accept, and that is to defund the police. Instead of putting billions of dollars into police departments to patrol these communities that have been criminalized and are impoverished, use that money to improve the school systems, the health systems, the transportation, the infrastructure, the social services, substance abuse and mental health treatment. When you do this, that is how you equalize. The problem is they don't really want that equality. There's a lot of money to be made in mass incarceration. And in addition to that, there really is the belief that a lot of people in this country are second-class citizens. That includes immigrants, of course. There are tons of them in detention centers all across the country whose only crime is coming here and not having citizenship or a green card quickly enough. They haven't committed any crimes other than just crossing an arbitrary border. When you look at criminalized survivors, the number of abuse and rape victims who are incarcerated for finally standing up to their accusers, when you look at all of the people and the race and class components of the people who are incarcerated on drug charges, and in particular marijuana, where white people predominantly and rich people are earning a fortune on legal marijuana, and there are actual exchange traded funds and stocks you can invest in if you're rich enough to get rich off of marijuana, while there are still people not only in prison for marijuana. But if you look at, it's not ending. If you look at New Jersey, where they just voted to legalize marijuana, over the 3 months since that was passed, 6,000 more people have been arrested for petty possession charges. So they're not even listening to laws that are passed because they want to arrest certain people. And so race is a huge part of that. But I agree that poverty is this unifying factor, because all people face situations that rich people don't. If you end up in the system and you end up with a public defender who is not supported by an amazing organization like Partners for Justice, you get the typical public defender who is overworked and underpaid and exhausted. You're screwed. With prosecutorial and judicial discretion, prosecutorial and judicial immunity, they can do whatever the hell they want to you. You could, I mean, on 3 strikes and other mandatory minimum laws, you could steal $9 and end up in prison for 30 years. Whereas if you're rich, you're going to be in and out really quickly. So I do think that, as Christian Smalls, who has been leading the fight to unionize and get proper benefits and protections for Amazon workers, told me, a general strike is the easiest thing we could do, and the most effective thing we could do. Unlike asking people to march on the streets and potentially get beaten or tear gassed or arrested, with a general strike, all you have to do is stay home. And if we succeeded with this, the billionaires who lose millions in a single day would be on their knees at our feet. It's just a matter of organizing, because we as the poor and working class have a lot in common.
Well, and this is again the point of my message, right? Is unification, right? Is we can have a difference of opinion, right? But at the end of the day, we're tax-paying citizens, right? We're both trying to survive. You're my brother in this fight, and you're my neighbor. You're my. So it's us understanding that we're both trying to just come to one common goal, and for me, that's to take back our country, right? I own responsibility, as I put every responsibility on every American. It's our fault we're in the position we're in, right? We didn't teach our children about the Constitution. Our children don't know their rights. And we have recklessly voted officials into office without really knowing who they are or what they're about, only because they were subscribed to Republican or Democrat. This group mentality that we formed in this nation is what's ripping us apart from the inside, and automatically, because I may say I support Trump or I support Biden, you automatically hate me without even understanding who I really am, just because I subscribe to something that you may not.
Yeah.
But either one may be more beneficial to my life than it may be to yours. You see, so
I don't think, and I think, well, for one thing, I think we've been this divided from day one. I don't think it's new, and I think that makes it even harder to overcome. And I also think that neither one of the two choices you mentioned are good for anyone who isn't rich and white. So, you have, the real differences between Trump and Biden are their public personas, like how overt they want to be with their bullshit. So much of what Biden has done in his first, month in office, Democrats would be losing their minds over if Trump had done it. That's the problem with reforms also, that only strengthen the system we're trying to dismantle. Biden was touted for saying he was going to sign contracts to end private prisons, for instance, but private prisons only represent 8% of all prisons. And if and when these private prisons are closed, all of the people in them are just going to go to different prisons. It's
And
still
let me
assumed.
and let me say this, right? I want the public to know this. Private prisons, you are treated better in private prisons. You get more amenities. You're just able to have a little bit more relaxation and freedom. Everybody was trying to get to private prisons.
Mm,
So what this guy did is not a favor for the criminal justice
no.
system.
It's certainly not a favor for anyone who is incarcerated.
Right.
And it assumes that prisons are still the only option. It's still the only answer. So it only further entrenches us in this system that mass incarcerates. Um, I think those who are hating people based on their vote for president are very misguided and focused on the wrong things. Overall, I think that down ballot elections are significantly more important. Who you vote for on the local level is where you can really see change. Who you vote for your city council or your mayor is going to impact your life more than your choice between two plutocrats, one of them who says Nazis are very fine people and one of them who wrote the crime bill and was a segregationist.
Right. And what are you going to do? Like up in New York, you're up there in New York, right?
Yeah.
So I just read an article this morning up there in New York City about teachers that are advising parents to explore their whiteness.
What?
You haven't heard this? So up there in New York City, it was an article that came out this morning. They're advising parents of students to explore their whiteness to see what kind of white person they are.
Oh, so not like to celebrate your whiteness, but to understand what your whiteness means.
Not to understand what your whiteness means. I'm trying to see.
Because that's a huge differentiation. Like if it's like, be proud of who you are, which is fine, but you shouldn't be proud because of your skin color. You should be proud of who you are as an individual, your family history, your culture, that the part of it that doesn't involve descending from slave owners. But understanding your whiteness and the privilege that comes with, I think is very valuable.
So here from Fox News.
Well, that's a bad start.
Well, it says New York City public schools ask parents to reflect on their whiteness. A city public school principal is asking parents to reflect on their whiteness, passing out literature that extols white traitors who dismantle institutions, education officials confirmed on the Post Tuesday.
So if they're calling white people who are against racism race traitors, then that's clearly a problem.
So the chart, they actually have a chart, and it goes from all the way from white abolitionist, which is the green side of the chart, all the way to white supremacists, and there's 8 in between,
Okay.
which is the red side of the chart. So again, this is my point: is this issue on race is pushed in our face. We can't let it go. And you're right in what you said, right, about us being divided from the beginning. There's no question about that because, as Sun Tzu says, right, you have to divide in order to conquer. This country cannot have 330 million Americans on the same page, right? So they have to divide us. How do they divide us? They give us labels. You have African Americans, you have Latino Americans, you have, but us, me being a white guy, I'm not European American, I'm not German American, I'm just American. So it's creating that divide from there and then keeping that divide active by putting race in our face every day, putting class in our face every day. So that's how it's keeping us divided.
Yeah. And they do the same things to Jews who, they equate to Israel.
No
Um,
question.
and, but unlike a black person, um, I can pass no problem. I don't have a yarmulke on every day. So, unless I wear my hat with the Star of David on it, I don't have to worry about someone attacking me. And the thing, and I have access to all of the best healthcare and all of this other stuff, because of, my wife is a nurse, and so we have health insurance. And but so, I do, I think we've said this enough, but like, class is the thing that we don't need pushed in our face because we live it every day. I work really hard and make very little. So that puts me at opposition to someone who, certainly someone who inherited money from, a prior generation, or someone who, due to a variety of systems and favors and, um, and discrimination in hiring practices, ends up being a rich CEO or whatever, C-suite executive, and works far less hard than I do and makes a million times more. I'm at odds with that person no matter what they look like. But I just want to warn, I don't know what the right word is. I know you mean well, but you have to understand that it's a privilege to be able to speak about race in the way that you are, where, it's something that we need to move away from. It's easy for someone who doesn't experience racism to say, we need to be beyond race. Race is a social construct, and that's not what we should focus on. If you experience racism, you may very well understand that race is a social construct, but it's generations ingrained and impacts your day-to-day life. So those people aren't the ones who need to change. It's the system that needs to change, and it's the people who don't recognize those realities in the system, and also have deep-seated hatred based on race, that need to change. We can't, as people who are white or pass for white, can't sit here on a pedestal and say, like, align with me because I'm poor. Here's what we really need to focus on. Like, we need to do, as a collective, a better job of listening to people of color, to women, to LGBTQ people, to people who experienced varieties of discrimination, and understand what their needs are and prioritize them, because they experience twice the difficulties in being successful, happy, and healthy than poor white people do.
No, and I hear you, and you're spot on, right? But a little bit about me, I grew up in the hood for the most part. I started, we were low income, our family, and we lived right outside of the hood. So 13, 14 years old, I was getting into trouble. I was a bad kid, and I was what you would call state raised, you know, until ultimately I ended up going into the federal system for 12 and a half years. I know that the system is racist, right? And what I'm trying to get people to understand is it's still a choice. At the end of the day, racism is the most ignorant thing that a human being can encompass. To factor in somebody's melatonin over their IQ or uh, uh, physical ability or anything of that nature is just complete ignorance. And people have to understand that. So when they hear anything about racism, you have to understand that this person that you're dealing with is a little bit more ignorant than you are in that aspect. And as us as human beings, it's our moral duty to not be angry at that person, but to enlighten and try to educate this person, right? Because it's ignorance. It's like one time I was talking to a homeboy of mine, and I'm trying to get him to understand what it is that I'm saying about how media perpenses most of this bullshit. Now, how I explained it to him is, say, and this was a black guy, long dreads, fit the critique of every criminal, but this is the nicest guy you would ever meet, right? Nicest guy. So it's like I told him, now, if a little old lady walks into a store and sees you in the store, long dreads, gold teeth, mean looking, big build, all of that, this little old white lady is going to grip her purse. She may turn around and leave the store because she saw you, right? You're going to say and call this woman, oh, she's a racist, right? And this may be true because she made a decision based upon your race. That is what racism is, right? When you factor in the a person's race into a decision, that essentially is what racism is. But does that make her a racist, right? So what I explained to him is like this, right? Is on the news, you have this little old lady that watches CNN all day, every day. And on the news, all she sees is people like you robbing people like her every day, all day long. Right.
Exactly.
So now she goes into the store, and of course, every human being's number one code is survival. Anytime we feel like we're in a threatening situation, we're going to think about survival. And this is what the media does. Now, he, of course, said that was bullshit. Oh, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. So I asked him, I said, well, let me ask you a question. If you get on a plane and you see a Muslim on there with a turban, what are you going to do? He's like, man, I'm going to get the hell off that plane. I said, that's the same point that I'm making, because the news media has told you that Muslims with turbans and long beards have bombs and they blow up planes. So now when you see that image, what are you going to do? You're going to get off the plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great analogy for him, and it's absolutely true. I mean, when mass incarceration really reached its height, and new prison construction was at its height, crime was rapidly decreasing, but media stories of violent crime was rapidly increasing. So they used the media to support the tough on crime policies that enable them to further this mission. It actually has nothing to do with what is designed to keep us safe or not. And you're absolutely right that when you watch the news, that's what you see. And what they're able to do with the laws they're able to create from this is target who they want to,
That's absolutely correct.
right? So like when they passed the Patriot Act, they immediately used the Patriot Act to target leftist activists. Now, after January 6th, they're arresting leftist activists, including people who were for the crime of their social media tweets, never actually committing a real crime, right, but for trying to organize, for instance, to protect the Capitol from far-right extremists. So, you see the way these same corporations that own the media also have a financial interest in policing and incarceration. The same corporations that donate to police foundations donate to politicians who pass the laws to incarcerate more people, build more prisons, which then pay people 8 cents an hour to work for these corporations. And state and federal prisons, not just private prisons, have partnerships with the same corporations for the clothes, the commissary, the bedding, everything else. So it really is all inextricably tied. And that's why, when you think about like, what is a solution to, people being patrolled in their own communities by people from other communities, people being arrested on petty charges, and people being stopped and frisked and beaten by police. It's not as simple to just defund the police. You need to reallocate those funds to the over-policed and criminalized communities. You need to remove police from schools. You need to end cash bail.
One of the
And
first things that we need to do is get rid of high crime areas, right? This is what I've been talking to a couple
what do you
attorneys
mean
about.
by what do you mean by
So
move?
in judicial, right? In law, right? You have what is called high crime areas. 99% of all high crime areas are low income minority communities, right?
Right.
So because now you have this moniker called high crime area, you're allowed to double the patrol, you're allowed different amenities,
Do you
different
mean the
tools.
term? You mean
Huh?
the do you mean getting rid of the term high crime areas or whatever? Or do you mean like what is the solution you're saying?
Stop separating. Like there should be no extra charges.
Right,
No, there should be no extra patrolling
right.
because this is so-called a high crime area. Just because this area has a little bit more crime than the other, right, does not mean that you can now focus all your attention on this high crime area.
And you have to consider two things. One, what well, you have to consider two things as to why it's a high crime area. One, crime typically results from desperation. So if people are
Poverty,
poor and they have no other solution, they're going to commit a crime.
right?
Um, Very few people commit crimes for fun. The other part of it is they're already criminalized and over policed. So if there are patrols racially profiling and targeting specific people using like laws against gang violence or loitering or all these other things that have been created post slavery to target specific people, the crime rates are going to go up. If there's no police in a suburban community, there's not going to be any crime, even though there is crime. White people, for instance, are just as likely to use drugs and are more likely to sell drugs. But that's not what you see in the prisons because no one's bothering them. So
Well,
yeah,
and that's true too. I mean, it's just like again, yes, I've experienced racism. A white guy, a white kid in the hood at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I was pulled out of the car. I was shook down on the side of the road for no reasons. The difference is I didn't live in it. You see, and this is what I explained. But for me, right, just being, I guess, the kid that I was, that was my first inclination was well, damn. Can you imagine if this was every day and
mm-hmm.
everywhere you went, you were just, targeted or focused or set aside as being something? So that is kind of when I started to realize that a lot of my education growing up was false and that it
Yep.
was and that it was a lie and it was race based, you
Right.
know.
And imagine coming from um, a poor home where you may not even have a father figure, or if you do, there's people working multiple jobs. You can barely, you may not even have enough money for breakfast. Like you go to school hungry, and you have to walk through a metal detector. You have to walk past a cop with a gun who has body slammed one of your friends before. Then you have to sit in a class with a teacher from outside your community who's telling you things that don't line up with your existence or things that will actually help you, have a better future. Like when you go to a militarized school, you are far less likely to benefit from whatever, you know, bullshit education you're even given.
Well, there's no question because you're in fear of what's going on around. You can't concentrate on school like
Right.
you can, an upper class
Yeah.
school.
And truancy laws and and disciplinary measures, expulsions, like all of these things, just like everything else, disproportionately target people of color. That's the school to prison pipeline. They're born, into neighborhoods with bars. They go to schools with metal detectors and cops, and next thing they know, the studies have shown that an interaction with a police officer increases the likelihood of future criminality. So once you have your first interaction, it's, if it's not your first entry into the system, you're not too far away. Meanwhile, while I also was a bad kid, I had a lot of run-ins with the police myself. When I was older, I was in Wilmington, Delaware, in a black poor neighborhood, and all of a sudden I hear police sirens and two cop cars like come to a halt right next to me on the sidewalk, and I'm like, the fuck did I do? Like, I'm pretty sure I had weed on me, and I just like, this could be a major problem too. Like, I don't live anywhere near here. They pulled me over as I was walking on the street to tell me to get in their car so they could drive me to wherever I lived or my hotel to protect me, because I was in a neighborhood where these dangerous people were going to.
Yeah, you have no business being down there at that time.
Exactly. They were trying to protect me. And I was like, I'm perfectly fine. The only people who bothered me since I was on this street are you guys. I passed a lot of porches with people on them. No one said a fucking word to me.
And again, that's it, right? Like, from my experience, Black people don't want to be talking about this crap. They just, they don't want Black History Month. They don't want this crap. They just want to be left alone and treated the same as everybody else. And this is what I'm trying to get people to understand. Like, why are we even talking about this? This is the stupidest shit to talk about, man.
I mean, we're talking about it because we have to. And Black leaders.
This is the point.
Right. I mean, but Black leaders, Black revolutionaries, Black feminist abolitionists, they're the ones leading not just these conversations, but the efforts to actually make the changes that will help their people. Certainly the average person doesn't want to waste their time with this because they're too busy trying to survive. And all of the performative bullshit and platitudes does not help. Black History Month should be every month. We shouldn't need a month to talk about the amazing contributions of Black Americans. Those should actually be in our history books. They're just not.
It's ridiculous, man.
Painting Black Lives Matter on a basketball court, or like, Black Lives Matter on the back of a basketball jersey doesn't fix the problem. It's it's made to pacify people.
Right.
Like, oh, we're doing something. Like, that's not actually doing something.
And that is disgusting to me and my wife, because we have to sit here and we watch a football game and we see all of this crap during the football game, the basketball game, and it's like, come on, man, stop it. I mean, she's a Black woman and she's tired of seeing this, because we know that it's placation, right? It's just fucking placation, man. And it's
Meanwhile,
disgusting.
There's no Black coaches in the NFL. They won't let Colin Kaepernick play. And so yeah, I mean, like, I was pretty, like, I don't give a shit about the NFL. I just boycott them. But the NBA, like, I was pretty vocal when, there was like people complaining that LeBron didn't want to put like Black Lives Matter on his jersey. It's because LeBron understands, for one, they didn't even ask the players what they should put on the jersey. They presented them with the options. They didn't even get to have a say in what should be on there. So that says right away that they're not actually listening. And he was like, I support anyone putting this on their jersey. I'm not doing it. The reason is because he knows that it's bullshit, and he's busy building schools for people who don't have good schools.
Right. Yeah. And, do you know who the one of the biggest backers of Facebook and Twitter are?
Who?
So it's a company called Dinobite.
Hmm.
Dinobite is owned. It's a company in Beijing, and it's owned by the CCP. And a lot of the research that I've been finding is the CCP and China is big donators of a lot of companies. They own most of Hollywood, and they're big backers of the NBA as well.
Interesting. And what do you
So,
think that says?
well, that says a lot when it comes to our media, because it's, again, this is what's being filtered to us. This is what we're in front of all the time. You know, it says a lot about the ignorance of Americans not understanding and realizing, one, what the CCP is, and two, what the agenda is as far as coming in and brainwashing the citizens with this crap. You know, I blame it all on media. You know, and the more I sit back and look at it, it's like in the 80s and 90s, right? The late 70s, 80s, and 90s, you had a series of all of these freaking shows that came out. Facts of Life, The Cosby Show, all of these shows that painted a perfect life where a problem arose at the beginning of the show, and a half an hour later, the problem was solved and everybody loved each other. And that's just not life, right? And it painted like this fictitious, uh what was the movie with Jim Carrey?
Liar, liar, you
No,
mean?
no, no. The one where he
Oh, the
was in
Truman Show.
the Truman Show. It created this fake reality like the Truman Show, right? Where now we have a bunch of these sensitive people that, like, they want to create laws to stop you from just calling me a name, right? Because they can't handle being called that name. And I think that
Yeah.
I think that all of that, because now you have to think that these kids that grew up on these shows are now in politics, uh, in big tech owners, CEOs,
Yeah.
right? And they're cutting deals, and accepting money from people that they shouldn't, and agendas change.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a really thin line between, being like fully invested in freedom of speech and trying to protect against hate speech. I'm not for censorship. We began this conversation talking about how I'm being censored. And, I found, I didn't fully support the what happened on social media platforms with the removal of many people on the right, only because I knew that it opened up the doors to do the same thing to people on the left, and we've seen it happen, on a variety of channels. And but at the same time, if you have someone in a position of power, literally providing marching orders to Nazis through social media, that's a little different from me interviewing someone or writing a song and sharing it, or writing an article about police brutality and like how to fix that. So like that's the most complicated subject for me. Censorship terrifies me. It leads us down this Big Brother 1984 path where we have no freedom whatsoever. But at the same time, we do have to do something to prevent the spread of, of disinformation. That includes the disinformation we see every day on the media. And it also includes the even more obvious disinformation that precipitated World War II.
Well, and that's exactly it. The only difference was with Germany, right, coming off World War I, being, the Versailles, agreement, and putting them in the position that they were in, is that there was no education, right? The
Yeah,
government
they
controlled
were
all
all poor.
education.
Yep, they were all poor and suffering and needed someone to blame. It was a perfect opportunity for Hitler to tell them it was all the Jews' fault.
That's exactly right. And there was no education, right, to deem otherwise, because they controlled all of that. The difference is here, right? We have that education. If
That's the value of independent journalism. And that, the fact that more journalists were killed worldwide in 2020 than ever before, the fact that, the United States has taken measures to weaken protections for media and, for all media in this country, and the deplatforming and demonetization of independent media channels, on social networks, is all very scary, because that is the only way we get the truth.
and there's no question, right? Again, censorship is wrong by all counts, and it's like I tried to explain to people, man, it's not about Donald Trump, right? It's not about Donald Trump. What scares me is the fact that big tech can shut down our United States president. That is what is scary, right? It's not the fact of Trump. It's the fact that
Well, he broke the rules. He is active.
he
Had
didn't break the rules any more than Kathy Lee Griffin, who had his head cut off, decapitated, and they just suspended him for a month.
fine.
Or
So, but
anybody
okay.
else.
So,
Right.
but what I'm saying is, if they need to be more serious about adhering to their rules and cutting off more people who are breaking them, fine, in a sense, because we do have to understand that it is not owned by the people. It's not owned by the government. It's a private corporation with policies. And if you break them, you are susceptible to losing your account. And he broke them repeatedly.
True enough, but they're public platforms, right? They're private companies that advertise freedom of public platform, right? And again, the only reason why
Advertising.
what but and the only reason why I say this is dangerous is because you, we have a people that just they don't research for themselves, they don't think for themselves, and
Right.
because somebody may have an agenda against me or you, right, they may have an agenda against me or you, they can create lies, right?
Mhm.
And people are going to parrot off those lies, and now next thing I know, I have 200 people camped out on my front lawn that
Mhm.
don't even know what the hell is going on, you
Yeah.
know and this is the type of censorship that I'm talking about, because I just voiced my opinion. I don't want to go out into a world where I have to think twice about whether I'm going to get repercussions on voicing my opinion.
I hear you.
You know,
I hear you.
I absolutely agree with the hate speech. There's no question that we should be hating on it. This again, this is my message, my point. Like, for instance, I had somebody on my Facebook that was a troll, I guess. And everybody that commented on my Facebook, this person was coming in, you're an idiot, you're this, you're that. And people would, some of my friends on the side, they would text and they would like, why haven't you blocked this person? And again, I say, just because this person is saying things that I don't agree with, right? I don't want to block this person from speaking. It's up to the people that is being offended by this person to ask themselves, like, why is this bothering me? This person's calling me an idiot, and it's pissing me off, but why? Because I'm not an idiot, my IQ's 125 or whatever. you know
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. And I know that's not why you're saying it, but like, I block the shit out of people, man. Like, I mean, Facebook's even worse than Twitter, and I don't really use it, but like on Twitter, I've blocked like 4,000 accounts. Because, and that's not an exaggeration. Because, I'm not blocking them from their right to speak on their stuff or go to someone else's page and say what they want to say. But, my time, like notifications are busy enough that I don't need someone who's just going to speak, who's going to threaten me, or who's going to, attack me, or, Like if someone wants to have a mature, good faith debate and I have the time for it, I might engage in it. But they're coming on my shit, and like if they're just going to be disrespectful or waste time and like distract me from things that I need to see, then I'm just getting rid of them. But I'm not saying that they don't have a right to be there. They just don't need to. I don't need them seeing what I'm doing.
No. And again, like I say, everybody has their own way of dealing with stress of life,
Right.
right? And again, I don't ever judge anybody on how they deal with things, because what your temperament is different from my temperament,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And this is what I tell people. But at the end of the day, I just I feel like, well, let me say this, because I left when I left. I left before MySpace, so I didn't grow with MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, all of this stuff. I came out and was introduced to all of this stuff, right?
How long have you been out for?
Since 16,
Okay.
and I was gone in '03.
A long.
So I feel like, with the advent of this blocking system, right? Because remember, before then, you couldn't really block somebody. You could hang up on somebody. You could not answer your door if they came to the house, but there was no system of really blocking people as is
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And we've gotten into this habitual uh, uh, fever of just constantly, if you don't like what somebody says or they annoy you, you just block them and it erases them. And
Mm-hmm.
what I've seen in my 17-year-old daughter, right, is the fact that whenever she hears or sees something that she don't like, she just shuts down from it, like
Mm-hmm.
she's blocking it mentally, and
Mm-hmm.
she's not trying to understand what this is in front of her, you know.
I have a 16-year-old daughter who's about to be 17, and that sounds very familiar. On the other hand, she has experienced, not the same level, like, not the same level of um, targeting and doxing and things that I have, but she's experienced harassment online, and I was very thankful she had the capability to block, because it was impacting her mental health. And
And there's no question.
when you're
The
being bullied, it's good to be able to end that.
and I want to point this out again. Like I say, it's all on the temperament. It's all on mental health. If somebody is affecting you personally, then yes, you have to eliminate this person from you. But it's very important that you self check yourself. I believe, right? You self check yourself in the fact, like, this person really bothered me, and I have to understand why this person controlled my emotions.
I agree. Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, the goal for each of us is to be able to walk through life and not let anything affect us. Like, we are in complete
yeah.
control of ourselves.
Are you a Buddhist?
I'm practicing.
Yeah. I love your I love like the way you hold yourself, and I love the way you think about life. And while we may not like be on we may not exactly agree on every single thing, like your like philosophy on life, I'm a major proponent of. And I feel like you're a calming force in the world.
Awkward. I look at you, right? And I have an overwhelming feeling of love, right? As I do everybody, because I understand that we're human beings, right? And I've come to a universal aspect of myself that we're hurting each other. We're not helping each other grow. You are who you are because of every decision that you have made through your life, and every circumstance you figured out has
Hmm.
created who you are, right? And because you have a difference of opinion, you see things different than I do, you still have a right to breathe, you still have a right to eat, to live. And I understand, at the end of the day, you and I and everybody else, we're just trying to survive. We're just trying to be the best that we know how to be, with the circumstances that we came up in,
Yeah.
right? And they're fucked up circumstances because we've been lied to. We've been lied, we've been manipulated, we've been brainwashed, right? And
Yeah.
I understand all of these things. So when I have a gentleman like you in front of me, I'm able to sit down and listen and just open my mind to what you have to say. And it either aligns with my life goals or they don't. But that's not going to make me hate you or not
Yeah.
want to talk to you anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because I can learn from you just like I can learn from a Nazi, just like I can learn from a child molester. I can learn from these people because at the end of the day, it's about making sure that I am the best person that I can be. And I know that a child molester, a Nazi, a rapist, a murderer, they're dealing with heavy mental health issues. And
Right.
I
Most
want to
perpetrators have been victims themselves.
and I want to understand exactly how that happened. So one, I don't put myself in that position or any of my bloodline, you
Hmm.
know. And that's just my philosophy, I'm a person who is not quick to kill. I'm not my first instinct is not kill first. If we have a little garden on our back patio and every once in a while a lizard will run in, I'm not there to squash the lizard because I understand the lizard is just trying to survive. I pick the lizard up, I put him back outside. But I have lines, if the lizard now comes in my house or he doesn't let me catch him so easily, then I might end up squashing him, because I'm the creator of all things, I guess, but
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Is there anything else you want to ask me? Just because we've been on a while, I got a ton of crap to do.
yeah, man, I appreciate the combo too, man. It's been a
Yeah,
great
me
combo.
too.
Really, that's it, man. Do you have any plugs?
Uh, well, I would say anyone who's made it through. I hope you've enjoyed this. Check out 10forjustice.com. It's the road to abolition. And check out the 10 Demands song and video. I'm working on an EP, my first album in like 7 years, coming out this year. But more importantly, on the 10 Demands site, you can actually with a simple text like sending 5 numbers to another 5 numbers with your phone. You can send a letter to your mayor, your governor, your state Congress, or national Congress, demanding that they invest in your community instead of in police. It's something that, the more they receive, the more popular, these concepts will be, the more pressure they will feel. And we just have to tell them, they're not getting reelected if they continue to, defend people who are out to, hurt us and not defend us.
Absolutely, man. Awkward. It's about education. It's about letting the people know. Let's
That's,
get Temujin out of prison, man.
oh yeah.
Let's get Temujin out of prison. It's been real. You're a real cat, man, and I appreciate what you do, man, for real.
Appreciate you too, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. I'll get back with you. Take it
All right.
easy.
Peace.
Thank you.